We've got some big developments to iron out for the rest of season at the running back position. So for certain guys, that means big opportunities ahead. For other guys, that means hard realities ahead. As long as we're on the same page, we're going through the rest of the season top 30 running back rankings. And I'm doing everything I can to get us all championships this year. So make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. Get into our first tier. It's exclusive for these two guys. I got some pushback for not having Devon Achane inside of tier 1, and I took a closer look at things. We'll get more into Devon Achane whenever we talk about him, which is not very far from now. But I will say Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey solely belong in this tier. If you look at the points per game drop from those two guys, it's pretty significant. And I mean, Jonathan Taylor, I'm going to prefer him over McCaffrey because of the fact that he's truly having a historic season. Like, he is a legitimate MVP candidate. I mean, this guy literally could win the MVP, and I think he has a better shot to do that than Saquon did last year. Because if you look at Jonathan Taylor through 10 games, he's got over 1,100 yards rushing, 6 yards a carry, 15 rushing touchdowns. Like, what he's doing is absolutely phenomenal. Now, Christian McCaffrey, it doesn't take away from what he's doing from a fantasy perspective, but CMC is not running the ball as well as JT. JT is averaging 6 yards a carry, McCaffrey 3.7. Like, there's just a clear difference on who's a more efficient back this year. The separating factor, of course, is that McCaffrey is a dog in the receiving game as usual. But it is very clear to me, these two guys belong in a very exclusive tier by themselves. Dropping down to our next tier, that's where we go through Devon Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Bijan Robinson. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, I want to kind of talk more about them here in a minute, but here's the reason I prefer Devon Achane ultimately. So with Devon Achane, first of all, in a full PPR, he's averaging 21.4 fantasy points per game. And we already know that the Dolphins' offense is very hot and cold. I mean, they just went through a game against Washington where they won it in overtime, but they only put up 16 points. So this is not an offense that you can count on to score 30 points a game. It doesn't really matter if they score a bunch of points or not. Devon Achane is such a central piece to this offense on a weekly basis. He determines how much they'll do. So even in their worst games, like against the Browns where they put up barely any points, he had about 13 points. This guy's floor is so high, and his ceiling, as we all know, is what he did against Buffalo, which is put on 40 points. So we just know that Devon Achane's floor and ceiling combo is awesome regardless of situation and regardless of matchup. Now, when it comes to Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan, here's the reason I prefer Bijan underneath Jahmyr Gibbs rest of season. So as we all know, a lot of you have probably seen this morning, a lot of Falcons news is coming out. Drake London is probably going to miss an extended period of time with a PCL strain, and we've also got Michael Penix, who may miss the remainder of this season. If it is going to be Kirk Cousins, I simply want not much to do with any Falcons options. If you look at the week that Bijan Robinson had to play with Kirk Cousins against the Miami Dolphins, that was when he had his clear worst game, 5.8 fantasy points in a full PPR format. Now, here's the other problem that Bijan deals with, is that Tyler Algier does take a lot of red zone touchdowns. Now, Bijan's coming off a 2-touchdown game, and he's always a great receiving back. He belongs in tier 2. But my whole thing is, even if he's going to be alone and there's going to be no other weapons there, I still don't prefer him because this team is sinking fast. Whereas with me in fantasy football, I just have a fundamental belief that you want the best players on some of the best teams. Now, Detroit is probably not the best team in the NFL. I would say they're probably far from it. But Detroit is still a much better team than Atlanta. And Jahmyr Gibbs, I would just trust him to hit ceiling games more moving forward when he's got Jared Goff at quarterback. He's still got a pretty good offensive line aside from what happened against the Philadelphia Eagles. Dominant front seven. Still got other weapons to surround him. So every team doesn't know we got to key in on one guy and stop their offense. I would just rather prefer that from a fantasy perspective on how often he's able to hit his ceiling moving forward. And with 2 games with Dan Campbell calling plays, he's been electric. So I just prefer Jahmyr Gibbs over Bijan. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got Rico Dowdle at number 6, Javonte Williams at number 7. So when it comes to Rico, right? Rico started out awesome. I mean, Rico was like averaging an insane amount of yards per carry those first couple of games that he started. But I will say this, ever since he took over the starting job, he got injured in that game versus Green Bay, where he was ultimately awesome in that game. But ever since then, not been the same player. If you look at the last 2 games, 2.9 yards per carry, 2.4 yards per carry. He's on the injury report every week, and he's still playing, which is like a sign of toughness that I respect. But at the same time, I don't trust that he's going to be able to hit a ton of ceiling games moving forward. And it's a little depressing. I've got him on several teams. I would like him to do well, but I kind of do wonder if we're going to just start seeing a bunch of 15-point games, some 17-point games, which are still good. But he's not hitting those 30-point games, those 28-point games like he was when he first took over the job. And that's the one concern I've got with Rico moving forward. And then Javonte Williams, we haven't even seen him play tonight. I think he's still a very good running back in fantasy. I mean, their running back room is being decimated with injuries. And even so, Javonte's always been the number 1 back here. And he gets receiving involvement on a pretty much weekly basis to raise his floor to a solid amount. I mean, his worst game this year was 7.3 points against the Arizona Cardinals. And that was the game they got crushed. So again, kind of Devon Achane light here, to where we're not getting like the 40-point ceiling from Javonte, but you are getting like a 26-point ceiling, a 25-point ceiling. So yes, he's clearly a tier 3 running back who is an awesome RB1. James Cook at 8, Josh Jacobs at 9 to round out this tier. So James Cook, the reason I prefer Javonte over James Cook is because we've just seen it time and time again. Buffalo goes away from James Cook way too often. And it's just like, it's a recurring theme over his entire career in Buffalo. There's games where he is the lead dog by far, and he has a 30-plus point ceiling like he had against the Carolina Panthers, where he put up 200-plus rushing yards. But in that game, he had 0 targets, and he's had multiple games with 0 or 1 targets this year. So he gets phased out of the offensive game plan, inexplicably so, far too often. And that's my one concern with Cook, is that moving forward, if he was my running back 1, that's okay because I know I can get the massive games, but I'd rather have him as a dominant RB2, similar to how I felt about Drake London before this injury. I would prefer him as my dominant RB2, but I don't feel super comfortable having him as my RB1 because he can get phased out, and we've seen it a lot. Josh Jacobs at 9. Obviously, this injury, we don't know what's going on here, but he did get injured in their game this past week versus the New York Giants. Now, apparently, he's avoided long-term injury, but, I mean, even if he misses a week or so and then comes back off that injury, maybe he's just not the same player. And I've been a big Josh Jacobs guy from day one this offseason. A lot of people clown me for how high I had him ranked. Turns out I was pretty right a lot of the season. He's averaging 18.1 fantasy points per game. He's been pretty awesome. But moving forward, I do wonder because he's already been a little inefficient this year, 3.8 yards per carry, but he's been a touchdown monster. So I feel like we can get those locked in still when he comes back, but I do worry ultimately about the efficiency, especially moving forward with this injury. And I kind of feel similar to Josh Jacobs, how I felt about James Cook, where I'd rather have him as my dominant RB2 moving forward than my RB1. And if your trade deadline has not hit yet, this is where I'd start to make some moves for guys like Devon Achane or guys like Bijan Robinson as buy low candidates potentially. And I do think that if you need a team breakdown, personalized advice, trade ideas, waiver ideas, now is the time to do it as we are searching for playoff success or just to wreck your league and destroy your friends' chances of their playoff hopes. So that is why I say it is the time to get a team breakdown from me, where you'll get personalized advice with waiver ideas, trade ideas, anything to help your team win a championship or wreck the league this year as far as other people's playoff chances. And if you want access to my weekly top 250 rankings, the automatic waiver tool, the comparison feature, and the league sync up feature on our site, fsroundup.com, you can go do the premium subscription over there. It's $6 a month. We made it cheaper so everyone around the world can afford to do this and get league-winning tools at an affordable price. Dropping down to our next tier right here. I've got Kyren Williams at 10, and Derrick Henry is still at 11. So with Kyren Williams, we just kind of feel like we know what he is, right? Like Kyren Williams is a guy that is going to get phased out of the game plan in certain scenarios, and sometimes he will produce lower games. Like there just won't be as many pop games with a guy like Kyren Williams, and I do think that he has potential to hit those ceiling games still of about 25 points. Now that's not bad. but I do think that he's more often going to hit the medium, which is going to be around 15 to 16 to maybe 17 points. Very solid production right there, and he is, again, on a really good offense. So I don't worry about the offense's production, and I do think having a running back on a really good offense is always something you want to do from a fantasy football perspective. And then Derrick Henry at 11. I simply buy into this more than I buy into Saquon Barkley at 12. Listen, if I'm lining these two guys up, they're both on winning teams. That's not the problem. But Derrick Henry, what we've seen since Lamar came back, is much more steady play. Now, he hasn't hit like a massive 30-point game or anything like that. And I think that's the reason I ultimately can't rank Henry much higher than this, is because I'm not sure if that's going to be the case moving forward. I think that what we're getting from Derrick Henry is probably what we're going to be getting the rest of the way. A high point of 20 to 25 points and a lower point of about 11 to 10 points, which I think is really good. And I do think they've got favorable matchups on the schedule that I would just trust more than Saquon Barkley. And listen, Saquon is on an offense that simply doesn't have as good of an offensive line as they used to. Like, it is vastly different from what it was just a year ago. The retirement of Jason Kelce, losing some guards to injury, it's completely affected this team's way of running the ball. And he's getting opportunities. It is not an opportunity problem. He's had 20-plus carries the last 2 games, and he's just not getting the job done. And I do think that he can, because he just put up 30-plus points on the Giants a couple weeks ago. I think he has the ability to, which is why I ultimately still want him in this range. But man, his frequency of hitting it because of the offensive coordinator and the offensive line probably just won't be nearly as much as we were accustomed to last year. And then Travion Henderson is at 13. Now I'm about to tell you something. As we get into the next tier, we're going to get into a bunch of rookies. Here's my reality and rationale of why I prefer Travion over the rest of them. Travion Henderson, if it were to work out, right? And there's still the massive question of if Mike Vrabel sticks with him as the RB1. But if it does, he's got a great offensive line. He's got a great offense surrounding him with Josh McDaniels as the play caller and a great structure that Drake May and Mike Vrabel have set up for this offense. They're winning and they have a great schedule moving forward. Now, here's the reason he's not higher than this, because I don't trust that Mike Vrabel will stick with him as the lead dog. I do think that when Ramondre comes back, he will have a role at some level. Maybe it's goal line carries, maybe it's short yardage opportunities. I do think Ramondre has a role, which eats into Travion's production. But he has had 5 touchdowns through the last 2 games. It's very hard to put that right back in the saddle and in the stable for the rest of the year. I think that toothpaste cannot be put back in the tube, and he will maintain a good role moving forward. So I've got him comfortably here at 13 with room to move up. Dropping down to our next tier. This is where we've got our 2 rookies. Amari and Hampton actually 1 spot over Genty. And the reason is because I think Genty has a floor. And I do think that Amari and Hampton is in position to where when he comes back, and if it really is after the bye week, which would be just after this week, he could be in good position to move forward. And I just trust his team more. Again, that's the bottom line, is a lot of these rankings, man, it comes down to if I'm splitting hairs, I'm going to choose the running back on the better team. Now, the problem I have with Hampton personally is that he is going to be in position to where he's kind of going to have to find some momentum again, because he had found the momentum after a slower start and then he got injured. Now, rookies and young running backs, they just are not able to adjust after an injury as fast as like McCaffrey would or Jonathan Taylor would, for example. So I do have that worry there, but I would still take the ceiling over Genty's. I think Genty has a really solid floor. I think moving forward, you can count on Genty's floor of being around 10 to 12 fantasy points because he gets so many opportunities, but it is on a bad team. And that's not going to change. This offensive line is not going to get better. This team is not going to get better. Even if they make a quarterback change eventually off of Geno Smith, it's not going to get much better. And I do think his ceiling is probably around that 20 to 25 point range, which is good. But I think his frequency of hitting the ceiling probably just not as high as it would be if Amari and Hampton is able to come back with the same momentum that he had and he comes back fully healthy. That's the reason I prefer Amari and Hampton over Genty. Breece Hall at 16, DeAndre Swift at 17. So when it comes to Breece Hall, right, we all know the tragedy that has fallen on him. It's just like, it's really sad. I mean, I really was rooting for Breece Hall to get freed from the Jets, and he was rooting for it too. Didn't happen. Now that's what we have to deal with here. Breece Hall, the good thing about him, and the reason I still prefer him as a solid RB2 moving forward is because we know, even on a bad team, he does have a high ceiling. And if you look at the guy's schedule moving forward, Baltimore this upcoming week, not a bad run defense to play against. Atlanta's defense, Miami's defense, Jacksonville's defense, New Orleans' defense, and then the Patriots in week 17, which is not a good matchup. But outside of that, there's a lot of open, potential decent plays that Breece Hall could have a big game in. And we know this guy has a 30-point ceiling. He's done it before. The problem here is that just the consistency of which he'll hit it is very, very hard to predict, because even when they play theoretically good matchups, it won't work out for him because he's just on such a bad team. So you've got to mitigate risk a little bit by putting him here at 16. Now with Swift at 17, I feel like I still prefer him over most of consensus. So a couple things have been made clear. Since their bye week, they have become a much better rushing team. Like DeAndre Swift since the bye week, 25 points, 20 points, 15 points, 14 points, and 9 points. Full PPR. Like, that's a really good streak that he's been on lately. And that's with the emergence of Kyle Monangai. But even with Kyle Monangai, he has had 13 carries and 21 carries in 2 straight weeks. And if you add on targets in the 13 carry game, he's had 2 straight weeks with 20 plus opportunities. Like, this is not a guy that's just going into the ether, right? Like, they want to use a 2 running back system. And I do actually think Kyle Monangai has room to move up, which is actually why I don't have DeAndre Swift higher, because I do still think he has that threat. But this is the bottom line. Ben Johnson wants a 2 running back system, and he's now found it with Swift and Monangai, and I want that moving forward. Chase Brown at 18, and Travis Etienne is at 19. So with Chase Brown, there's obviously going to be the discussion of what happens when Joe Burrow comes back, right? And as of last week, we heard that Joe Burrow is targeting a week 13 return. So basically right after this week. My whole thing on that is if they lose this week, and they're playing the Patriots to be exact, what's the likelihood that Burrow comes back then? I don't know. I mean, I think there's still a chance that Burrow doesn't come back, because why is he going to want to come back to a team that has no shot, risk further injury, and risk his availability at the start of next year? I don't know. I still feel like it's still up in the air as far as what his upside is. But I will tell you this, Chase Brown's upside has been awesome with Joe Flacco. It has been really good. He's had 4 straight games, 12 points, 25 points, 19 points, 18.7. He's done very well. My ultimate problem with him is still it feels like a house of cards in Cincinnati that could come crumbling down at any point. Joe Flacco getting increasingly banged up behind that bad offensive line. I do worry about the future of that. And if Burrow doesn't come back, that's where things go completely awry. And Travis Etienne at 19. Now, here's the thing with Travis Etienne. I've got him well lower ranked, probably than rest of consensus does. I haven't checked consensus on this. I just have a feeling this is a top 12 back in fantasy. I've got a feeling I'm lower on him than many other people are. He's coming off his best week since week 4, and that's kind of the ultimate problem here. In between week 4 and week 11, here's what he did. 8 points, 9.5, 6.5, 16.5, 15.7. Now, those last 2, they were good. Obviously, they're not going to kill you or anything like that. But his ceiling has been around 18 to 19 points this year. And if you look at the history of Travis Etienne, he's typically gotten worse as the season goes on. So that's the reason I'm a little bit fading Travis Etienne heading into the down stretch here. But I do still think, hey, Jacksonville, they're competitive this year. So maybe this is not the year where he falls into the ether at the end of the season. Maybe it's the year he is competitive. So I could be wrong on this ranking, but I've got him sitting here at number 19 for now. And Bucky Irving at 20 to round out the tier. So obviously that's the big discussion, right? When is Bucky Irving coming back? And when he does come back, where does he rank? So this is me factoring in that I don't know when Bucky returns because nobody knows. And that's been my problem the whole season with trading for Bucky Irving, viewing him as a buy low player. I have a problem with that mentality because we have no idea when he's coming back. Yes, in theory, maybe it's this week because he was practicing last week at a minimal level. but we still don't know for sure. And that's a reason I've got to have him ranked at 20. Now, the other reason is because when he comes back, what does it look like? All I know is this. Bucky Irving, when he started to take over last year, that's when he got injured. Because this is a slimmer-framed player who probably just can't hold up from all the punishment that he gets as a lead back and getting 20-plus opportunities on a per-game basis. Now, if he manages to stay healthy, this is way too low of a ranking. I'm fully aware of that, but I'm not convinced that he can. So I've got number 20 as a rightful place for Bucky Irving. Dropping down to our next tier, Quinshon Judkins is at 21, and Jaylen Warren is at 22. When it comes to Quinshon Judkins, I think a lot of the league has figured out what the problem is. In Cleveland, if you have figured out that by watching film, all you have to do is stack the box against Judkins, and they can't move the ball with Dylan Gabriel. Now, obviously, Dylan Gabriel went out. He got a concussion, and Shedeur Sanders is probably going to start in Week 12. So maybe it increases his upside, but if you watch Shedeur play, I don't know how you think that he's that good either. He is not very good. He threw a freaking interception on his first play of the game. Not that great, but I will say this. I do think that most defensive coordinators have figured out how to stop this team. Stop the run, and you're good. The last 3 games, 4.7 points, 10.5, and 5.9. Just not been good enough. And I do think that a big reason of that is because teams have figured it out. Because he's gotten opportunities the last 2. 22 carries last week 10, 17 carries this past week against the Ravens. He's getting work. It's just that teams have figured it out. So I do think from a workload perspective, he belongs in this range. But I can't put him much higher than this because I'm not sure how many more games he'll hit his ceiling. Jaylen Warren at 22. Now, here's the problem, and I feel like I've been on the wrong side of a lot of people for a long time on Jaylen Warren. Listen, I look at reality, guys. I am a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and Steelers fans love Jaylen Warren. Trust me, I like Jaylen Warren a lot. The guy is a try-hard player. He has a motor that doesn't quit, and he is a good explosive player when he's given opportunities. Now, if you look at the tea leaves, this past week before the week happened, when they lost to the Chargers coming off that bad loss, there was reports that were being leaked that a lot of players on the offensive side of the ball, including Aaron Rodgers, were not happy with Jaylen Warren's lack of role in the offense. And mind you, the guy's been getting like 15-plus opportunities on a per-game basis. So they try to give him a more heavy workload against Cincinnati, and he gets injured. This has always been my problem with Jaylen Warren. I do not think that he's built as a true workhorse running back. If you look at his fantasy production, his floor is very stable. 8 points at the bare minimum this year. But his ceiling is about 19 points, which is solid. But again, I don't see massive upside weeks for Jaylen Warren because I don't think that he can handle the full workload that they want to give him in Pittsburgh from the player's perspective, and maybe myself as a fan as well. All I'm doing is looking at reality here. So don't take this personally. It's not personal. I love Jaylen Warren, but I also see the reality of the situation, which is he's just not built as a true RB1 by workhorse definition. RJ Harvey at 23, Woody Marks at 24 to round out the tier. So when it comes to RJ Harvey, my fears of this kind of came true against the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, he had 11 carries in that game and 3 targets. That's just not good enough to be a good fantasy back on the level of like a Travion Henderson breakout, right? Like with Travion Henderson, it's very clear the guy can be a 3-down bell cow. RJ Harvey, it's still not clear. I mean, his best games this year have been in minimal production where he gets in the end zone at the goal line or has a really sweet route that he takes to the house. Like, that's been RJ's bread and butter this year, is big plays. And my whole fear after J.K. Dobbins went down, yes, in theory, they're going to give him more work on a more consistent basis. That's why he's higher in my rankings. But I can't put him too much higher because I still believe Denver will split work, and they did exactly that against Kansas City. Kind of expecting it to do that moving forward because it's working for them. Woody Marks at 24 to round out the tier. I think that Woody Marks, again, when I'm looking at breakout potential, I see the breakout potential in Woody Marks to a certain point. He's on a bad offense with a bad offensive line, so I have to mitigate the upside here just by looking at the numbers. Like his best game, yes, 27.9 points. That was against the Titans the first time around. Ever since then, his best game has been 16 points. And that's just because he's on a bad offense, man. So you just cannot look at this situation and say, gung-ho, like they're not giving Nick Chubb opportunities. He had 18 carries this past week against the Titans and had 6 points. That's because this offensive line is trash. And it's not going to get better as the season goes and they play teams like the Bills, the Colts, the Chiefs. Like, this is not going to get much better. So yes, I like the opportunity from a breakout perspective on a minimal level, but I can't overrank him just because he's a young, explosive player. He's still on a bad offense. Dropping down to our last tier, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet in Seattle. I said leading into the week, this was like the last week I was going to defend Kenneth Walker in my ranking over him consistently over Zach Charbonnet. And my whole rationale for doing this very consistently is because Kenneth Walker is an explosive back. He's way more explosive than Charbonnet, and I believe in his ability to hit big plays. And that happened, finally, against the Los Angeles Rams, a really tough defense, by the way. So I do think that I feel a little vindicated in having Kenneth Walker above Charbonnet. Now, they're still back-to-back because Charbonnet is the goal line back. And that's been proven throughout the year, and it will continue to be that way because they've had success doing that. So I do think Charbonnet still has a role inside the top 30 as a guy who can get touchdown upside, and you can kind of rely on that opportunity moving forward because that's been the way it is, and it will continue to be the way it is in Seattle. Kyle Monangai actually made it inside the top 30, and Aaron Jones is at 28. Now, here's my thing. When it comes to Kyle Monangai versus Aaron Jones in my rankings particularly, I view Kyle Monangai, as I said when I was discussing Swift, as a player with more room to grow. If you actually look at Monangai, yes, the past 2 weeks have been mostly just touchdown upside. And that's a big reason why I think he belongs in the top 30. This is becoming a Zach Charbonnet type of deal, where he's getting a pretty consistent workload on the ground at the red zone. This is a Ben Johnson offense that wants to utilize Monangai as his light version of David Montgomery. Now, the reason I think he has more potential moving forward is because I do think that he could start to earn more carries over Swift at some point. Not convinced it's happening yet, but the last 2 games, 7 carries with Swift back and then 12 carries with Swift back. So I do think there's room here in certain game scripts and in certain situations for Kyle Monangai to be better, and that's why I've got him over Aaron Jones at 28, because we know what Aaron Jones is. Aaron Jones is an explosive player who can't handle many opportunities on a per-game basis, who's also on a bad offense. And yes, I said it. It's a really bad offense, man. J.J. McCarthy, I don't know why this was controversial when I said this at the beginning of the year. He's not good. And it's way worse than I actually thought it was going to be. He is incapable of moving the ball much. And even with Kevin O'Connell, even with the playmakers over there, it's not working. Now, I could argue Kevin O'Connell owns a lot of blame in this whole situation, but the bottom line is it doesn't matter. Aaron Jones' ceiling is not that high, 15 points at best. So Aaron Jones, I still think that he'll get explosive plays here and there. But as far as opportunities go, there's not going to be many games like he just had against the Bears where he had 22 opportunities. That's an outlier game. So I do think that he's just capped, and that's the way it is. Trey Benson at 29 and Tyrone Tracy Jr. at 30 to round us out. So with Trey Benson here, I think that it's very similar to the Amari Hampton situation. This was a young player who was on the right path, building momentum for himself, and then got injured. There is no guarantee that he comes back and breaks out. And first of all, we don't even know when he's coming back. We have more clarity on Hampton than we do on Benson at this point. Benson was supposed to theoretically return last week and the week before that. So with Trey Benson, I don't know when he's coming back. I do think when he comes back, he belongs in the top 30 because they will give him work. So even if he starts out a couple of games just on a lower, efficiency level, probably finds his way at some point with the offense now moving better with Jacoby Brissett. And Tyrone Tracy Jr. at 30. Listen, if he starts to take more of the work, this is a lower ranking because I do think that Tyrone Tracy Jr., I remain steadfast in what I saw last year. This is a player who has explosive capabilities. And we saw a little bit of that against the Packers this past week when he had 17.9 fantasy points, 4 targets for 51 yards, and 88 yards on the ground on 19 carries. He can do well. This is a good player who does have receiving upside. So I do think that if maybe they start to give more of a workload heavier in Tracy's favor, it could start to turn out well, and the Giants still can't put up points. Their problem has been largely defensive over the weeks, and I do think their offense can put up points, whether it's Dart or whether it's Jameis Winston moving forward. The good news is we don't have to see any more of Russell Wilson unless both those guys go down. So I do think Tracy, to a certain degree, does have some upside. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see the full top 12 defense rankings for the fantasy playoffs, click on this video right here.